In 2018 and 2019, I went to Bonneville with a car I built. It's black and sinister looking, so I call it the Werewolf. At car shows, I let the little kids sit in it and get their picture taken by their parents, but they all call it the Batmobile. We're loaded up and ready for a 900-mile trip up to Bonneville Salt Flats, Utah. This trip we stopped overnight in a little town called Boulder, just outside of Hoover Dam. The drive north from Las Vegas up to Wendover on Route 93 is really spectacular. We arrived in Wendover, and on the Nevada side, gambling is legal, so there are a lot of gambling casinos. Fortunately, the casinos allow racers to park overnight in their parking lot. The next morning we drove out on the salt, unloaded the car, and collected a few onlookers. We started setting up our pit. We were pretty early, so there weren't many other people there yet. By the way, at Bonneville you have to have ground cover to make sure that nothing leaks out on the salt. Now that we have some shade, it's time to check things out before heading down to tech inspection. You can't drive a race car anywhere except on the course, so in the pits, the speed limit is 5 miles per hour. Off we go to tech inspection. A fellow named James showed up in our pits and volunteered to help, so he drove my truck and towed me down to tech inspection. Tech inspection is very thorough. Primarily, they're interested in safety. At Bonneville, the speeds are very high, and if you crash, you may be 7 miles from any help, so you have to survive for a longer time than in most racing. The tech inspectors weren't happy about a couple of things, so James towed me back to the pit, and it's time to get to work. Back in the pits, the inspectors wanted to see the vent line for the fuel cell vented overboard. They also considered the top of the panel containing the fuel cell as being in the cockpit. Fixing that was not going to be easy. Mikey, one of the tech inspectors, dropped by our pit and helped us check out a few other things as well. Jerry Jacobson from the Vesco team volunteered to help me, and he supplied a couple of fittings and a short piece of hose, and voila, our venting overboard was solved. Closing off the fuel cell from the cockpit was much more complicated. The solution was laughable, but it worked. At the local Ace hardware store, we found some thin sheet metal in the form of a stovepipe, and with tin snips and pop rivets, we managed to close off the cockpit from that fuel cell, and it passed tech inspection. After I got home, I tore off the temporary sheet metal panel and replaced it with a proper aluminum panel. Okay, things are looking better. Time to race tomorrow. The first day of racing starts with the driver's meeting on Saturday morning. I'm here with James, suited up in a staging lane, ready to run, wearing a -20 fire suit. Time to put on my helmet and fire it up. Well, that was a disgraceful performance. First, I stalled the engine and had to restart it. Then, when I shifted out of first into second, I accidentally got third, and it was running so rich it misfired, and eventually the fire went out. I coasted off the course and waited to be picked up. On the way back to the pit, we stopped at the timing tower and picked up our timing slip. There it is in black and white, 65.08 miles an hour. Hell, I did faster than that on the way up there, on the trailer. It was clear that there was something dreadfully wrong with the engine, so the only choice was to pack up and head home. On the way back, we came down through Utah and stopped at a friend's house in Page, Arizona, just by Lake Powell. Back home at the workshop, was it all worth it? Well, maybe. I'm thinking about what I have to do and in which order. The engine has to come out. It was running pig rich, as evidenced by the black smoke, and it was making a funny noise when I was trying to crank it over. Time to tear it down. I designed the rear of the chassis so the engine and the transaxle could be lifted out as one unit without having to unbolt them. You can see how rich it was running. The tops of the pistons are just absolutely black. My engine is an aluminum block Donovan, essentially a copy of a small block Chevrolet. I used an Urson timing gear drive. Gary's machine shop here in Tucson did a nice job of taking 2000s off the cylinder walls with a nice hone pattern. Since the engine was apart, I decided to put in a new set of bearings. Very nice King bearings with a special coating. Gary checked the crankshaft, and all it needed was a little bit of polish. It's a Lunati stroker crank, so it gives me 383 cubic inches. The rods are Crowler Sportsman, and the pistons are made by Cosworth in UK. They are actually NASCAR Pontiac pistons. By the way, I applied a dry film coating with molybdenum disulfide and graphite to the Cosworth pistons. This Donovan block is O-ringed, so I had to use copper head gaskets. I found out what the problem was, making the noise when I was cranking the engine over. It turned out to be a couple of teeth missing off the ring gear, so time to order a new one from Kennedy Engineering. I decided to upgrade my clutch to a higher torque capacity. This time, instead of an organic clutch disc shown above, I ordered a metallic disc clutch from Kennedy. It turned out that the basic engine problem was due to the carburetor. The Holley 850 was definitely junk. There must have been a cracked casting or something like that. So to take advantage of something a little more modern, I ordered a Proform 850. As a little added insurance, I put in a Speedway high-flow thermostat. Now it was time to get rid of that shift linkage that was causing so much problem. I replaced the bearings with Thompson linear bearings and the shaft with Thompson 60 case shaft. Very hard stuff, and it really improves things. My original shift linkage design had the pattern reversed. In other words, first gear was over to the left and back instead of the conventional way. This I corrected. Okay, back together again, and it sounds a lot crisper. The next thing to do is build a new seat so I can scrunch down a little bit further to get the helmet down. Of course, now the question is, how fast will it go? Well, it's geared for 209 at 7,200 RPM, but for right now, 65 miles an hour, jeez,